The boardroom lights are too bright, making everything feel exposed. I'm mid-sentence, presenting my client retention strategy, 6 months of research, data, and careful planning, when Richard Hale cuts me off. "Erin, sweetheart, let me stop you there." His voice drips with condescension. The entire board turns to look at him. My throat tightens. This idea is adorable. Really. But completely impractical for a firm of our caliber. Laughter ripples around the table. My face burns. I grip my presentation clicker so hard my knuckles turn white. He continues, louder now, enjoying the audience. "Maybe stick to administrative tasks, Cole. Strategic planning isn't really your strength, is it?" More laughter. I force myself to stay standing, to not let my voice shake. "I have data that shows." "Data?" He waves his hand dismissively. "I've been doing this for 15 years. Trust me, I know what works." The CEO, Mr. Thornton, shifts in his seat. His cold gaze moves from Richard to me, lingering for a moment. I can't read his expression. I sit down, humiliated, my heart pounding in my ears. That was the day I stopped playing nice. My name is Erin Cole, and I'm 28 years old. I joined Hale and Burrow Consulting 3 years ago, fresh out of business school, full of ambition and hope. I believed hard work and talent would be enough. For the first 6 months, everything seemed perfect. Richard Hale, 45, senior partner, third-generation legacy at the firm. Seemed like a mentor. He praised my work, invited me to important meetings, and called me his rising star. I thought I'd found someone who believed in me. I was wrong. The shift happened gradually. My ideas started appearing in his presentations, worded slightly differently but unmistakably mine. Client wins I'd secured were credited to the team in reports, with Richard's name listed first. When I brought up concerns, he'd smile and say, "That's how teams work, Erin. We all contribute." But only his name got the recognition. Only his career advanced. I used to believe effort was all that mattered. That if I worked harder, stayed later, proved my value, I'd eventually get what I deserved. Richard taught me differently. He taught me that some people take credit for others' work and call it leadership. That illusion of mentorship died the day I watched him steal my first brilliant idea. It happened during a client pitch for Morrison Industries, a potential 7-figure contract. I'd developed the entire proposal, market analysis, implementation strategy, projected ROI. Richard reviewed it the night before, offering minor feedback. The next morning, we walked into the client's conference room together. I carried the presentation folder, ready to present. Richard smiled at me reassuringly. Then he began speaking. Using my words. My research. My recommendations. Every single point I'd crafted over 3 weeks of late nights and weekends. I sat frozen, watching him gesture confidently, watching the clients nod and take notes, watching him answer their questions with information I'd provided him yesterday. When they signed the contract, they shook his hand. Congratulated him on brilliant strategic thinking. He thanked them graciously, never once mentioning my name. Afterward, in the elevator, I finally spoke. That was my proposal. He looked at me, amused. And you did great work on it. But clients want to hear from senior leadership. That's just how it works. You'll understand when you've been here longer. My jaw tightened. I said nothing. But a coworker named Andre, who'd witnessed everything, leaned over during lunch and whispered, "He's done this before." To others. Be careful. That's when I started paying attention. 6 months later, a senior analyst position opened. I applied immediately. My performance reviews were excellent. I'd brought in 3 new clients. I'd exceeded every metric. The promotion should have been mine. Instead, they gave it to Marcus Hale, Richard's nephew, fresh out of college with 0 consulting experience. I requested a meeting with Richard to discuss why I'd been passed over. He leaned back in his chair, that familiar smirk on his face. Erin, you're a hard worker. Nobody's questioning that. But leadership requires a certain presence. Gravitas. Maybe aim a little lower for now. He paused, letting the words sink in. Start where you belong. Maybe the mailroom needs organizing. The mailroom. He was comparing my 3 years of strategic work to sorting mail. I walked out of his office, hands shaking with rage. But instead of crying or quitting or confronting him publicly, I did something different. I started documenting everything. Every stolen idea. Every dismissive comment. Every time he took credit for my work. I created a folder on my personal cloud drive labeled insurance. If he wanted to play games, I'd learn the rules first. Then I'd rewrite them entirely. I became a student of office politics. Not to play the game Richard's way, with manipulation and credit stealing, but to understand how to protect myself within it. I built quiet alliances. I helped junior analysts with their projects, never taking credit. I stayed professional in meetings, even when Richard undermined me. I learned to document conversations, to follow up verbal agreements with written confirmation emails. Each insult became data. Each dismissive comment went into my folder, timestamped and contextualized. Andre became my informal mentor. Richard thrives because people are scared to challenge him, he explained over coffee. His family founded this firm. He thinks he's untouchable. Is he? I asked. Andre shrugged. Depends on whether someone builds a strong enough case against him. I started noticing patterns. Other employees, mostly women and younger staff, had similar stories. Ideas stolen, credit taken, careers stalled. But they'd all left quietly, intimidated into silence. I wasn't going to leave quietly. One afternoon, I overheard Richard on the phone with HR, his office door slightly ajar. Erin Cole? She's fine. Adequate. But frankly, I'm concerned about her ability to handle complex client relationships. Too emotional, you know? Too emotional. The classic dismissal. I stood outside his door, recording every word on my phone. Calm, careful, methodical. My revenge was taking shape. I didn't react to the HR conversation. Didn't confront Richard or file a complaint. Instead, I collected more proof. Late one night, working on a proposal Richard had assigned me, I noticed something interesting. He'd forwarded my draft to a client, claiming it as his own work, but he'd accidentally copied me on the email chain. Screenshot. Saved to my folder. Another time, I discovered he'd been padding expense reports, charging personal dinners as client meetings, inflating travel costs. Small amounts, easy to miss individually, but adding up to thousands over time. I created a spreadsheet tracking every discrepancy, cross-referencing them with actual client meeting schedules. I wasn't trying to destroy Richard yet. I was building a foundation so strong that when the time came, he couldn't wriggle free. Then something unexpected happened. A client Richard had worked with, Brennan Logistics, sent me a private LinkedIn message. Hi Erin, I worked with your firm last year and wasn't happy with the results. Would you be open to a confidential conversation about what really happened with our account? My heart raced. This was either an opportunity or a trap. I responded carefully, I'd be happy to discuss your experience. When will it work for you? We met at a coffee shop far from the office. The client, Ms. Brennan, was in her 50s, sharp-eyed and direct. Richard Hale overcharged us by 30%, she said bluntly. Promised results he never delivered. When we questioned the invoices, he became defensive and blamed his team, specifically mentioning you as the reason for delays. My stomach dropped. He blamed me for covering up his own failures. I'm sorry that happened, I said carefully. I wasn't aware. I know you weren't. That's why I'm telling you. She slid a folder across the table. Copies of everything. The inflated invoices, the emails where he made false promises, the reports that didn't match what we actually received. I stared at the folder. Why are you giving me this? She smiled grimly. Because I've been in business long enough to recognize when someone's being scapegoated. And because Richard Hale shouldn't be allowed to keep doing this to people. I took the folder home and added every document to my growing file. Richard wasn't just stealing credit and undermining employees. He was defrauding clients. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was bigger. Richard called me into his office the next week with an HR representative present. My pulse quickened, but I kept my face neutral. Aaron, we've had some concerns raised about your professionalism, the HR rep, Mr. Santos, began uncomfortably. Richard mentioned you've been emotional in client interactions? I looked at Richard. He met my gaze with false concern. Can you provide specific examples? I asked calmly. Richard shifted. Well, there was the Morrison pitch where you seemed flustered. The pitch where I developed the entire strategy that won us a 7-figure contract? I interrupted gently. I have the original files timestamped, if you'd like to review them. Silence. Or the Brennan Logistics account, where you told the client I was responsible for delays? I continued, my voice steady. I have emails showing I flagged timeline concerns weeks before the deadline, which were ignored. Mr. Santos glanced at Richard, whose face was reddening. I'm not emotional, Mr. Santos. I'm precise. There's a difference. I smiled pleasantly. Is there anything else? The meeting ended quickly. As I left, Mr. Santos quietly asked me to let it go for the sake of office harmony. Sure, I said, still smiling. But I wasn't letting anything go. I was just getting started. A week later, I received an unexpected lunch invitation from Mr. Walters, a senior partner I'd barely interacted with. He was in his 60s, semi-retired, but still held significant influence. We met at an upscale restaurant downtown. He got straight to the point. I've been watching you, Ms. Cole. Your work ethic is impressive. Your results speak for themselves. He paused. I've also been watching Richard. My guard went up. Was this a warning? A test? I'm not sure I understand, I said carefully. Richard Hale is a legacy hire who's coasted on his family name for years. He's created a pattern of taking credit for others' work and pushing out talented people who threaten him. Mr. Walters leaned forward. I admire your patience. But patience alone won't change anything. What would you suggest? He slid a thin folder across the table. Build your own case. Truth doesn't need a microphone, it just needs documentation. I opened the folder. Inside were copies of old HR complaints against Richard, dating back 5 years. Complaints that had been filed, then quietly buried because of his family connections. Why are you helping me? I asked. Because this firm deserves better. And because I'm tired of watching good people leave while mediocre men thrive. He stood to leave. Use it wisely. I stared at the folder long after he left, feeling the weight of what I now held. The next month, Richard reassigned me to a low-visibility project, restructuring operations for a small manufacturing client. It was clearly a demotion, his way of sidelining me after I'd pushed back. This is more your speed, he said dismissively. Let the senior team handle the important accounts. I accepted the assignment without complaint. Because Richard had made a critical miscalculation, he assumed I'd be demoralized. Instead, I threw myself into the project with everything I had. I spent weeks analyzing the client's operations, identifying inefficiencies, and developing solutions. I worked directly with their team, building trust, delivering results. 3 months later, the client's productivity had increased by 40%. Their costs dropped by 25%. They were so impressed, they expanded their contract and referred 2 other companies to Hale and Burrow. The CEO, Mr. Thornton, personally reviewed the success report. And this time, my name was front and center because I'd been working directly with the client, with no one to filter my contributions. Mr. Thornton called me to his office. "Impressive work, Ms. Cole. This is exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need more of." I thanked him professionally, saying nothing about Richard's attempt to bury me. But I knew Richard had noticed. And I knew he was panicking. Richard's panic manifested as sabotage. Subtle at first, reassigning my team members without notice, excluding me from key meetings, questioning my decisions in front of clients. Then it escalated. He accessed my project files and altered client data, making it look like my projections were inflated. He planned to present the corrected numbers to Mr. Thornton, exposing my supposed incompetence. But I'd anticipated something like this. Every file I worked on was automatically backed up to my personal cloud storage. I had versions timestamped and saved, showing exactly when and how the data had been changed, and by whom. When Richard submitted his corrected report to Mr. Thornton, he made one fatal mistake: he accidentally used the track changes feature in the document. Every edit was visible, including his username and timestamp. The fake numbers, sent directly to the CEO, were clearly manipulated by Richard Hale at 11:47 p.m. the night before submission. I didn't say anything. I just waited. The next morning, Mr. Thornton's assistant called an emergency meeting. Richard arrived looking confident. I arrived looking calm. And I watched as Mr. Thornton asked Richard to explain the discrepancies in his report. Richard fumbled. Sweated. Contradicted himself. I stayed silent, watching him dig his own grave. Mr. Thornton's jaw tightened as Richard stumbled through explanations that made no sense. "You're telling me Aaron's original projections were wrong, but you can't explain why your corrections don't match the client's actual reported data?" "There must be some confusion," Richard started. "The document shows you edited it at midnight." Mr. Thornton's voice was nice. "Why would you be correcting her work at midnight, Richard?" Silence. Richard's face was bright red. "I was just ensuring accuracy." "By changing accurate data to inaccurate data?" Mr. Thornton closed his laptop. "We'll be conducting a thorough review of this matter." "Both of you, dismissed." In the hallway, Richard grabbed my arm. "You set me up." I pulled away calmly. "I did my job correctly. You tried to sabotage it." "There's a difference." His eyes blazed with fury, but he said nothing more. That afternoon, Mr. Thornton called me privately. His office felt smaller than usual, more intimate. "What's really going on here, Ms. Cole?" he asked quietly. I could have stayed silent. Could have played it safe. But Mr. Walter's words echoed in my head: truth doesn't need a microphone. "Mr. Thornton, I believe there are patterns of behavior that deserve examination. I'm not making accusations, but I think an audit might reveal some concerning practices." He studied me for a long moment. "What kind of audit?" "Project attribution, client billing, expense reports. Just to ensure everything aligns with our stated values." He nodded slowly. "I'll consider it." 2 days later, Mr. Thornton announced a comprehensive internal audit of the consulting division. The email was vague, mentioning routine quality assurance, but everyone knew something had triggered it. Richard cornered me in the break room. "This was you, wasn't it?" "I have no idea what you're talking about," I said mildly, pouring coffee. "You think you're clever. You think you can destroy me." He leaned closer, voice low and threatening. "I've been here 15 years. My family built this firm. You're nobody." I met his gaze evenly. "Then you have nothing to worry about. But he did have something to worry about. Because the audit was already uncovering irregularities, inflated expenses, questionable billing practices, projects where credit didn't match contribution. All tied to Richard's department. I kept working, kept my head down, and kept delivering results. My manufacturing client expanded their contract again. Another client specifically requested me for their next project. Meanwhile, Richard's world was quietly unraveling. He just didn't know how bad it was yet. One afternoon, Mr. Santos from HR appeared at my desk. "Ms. Cole, I need you to come with me, please." My stomach dropped. Richard must have escalated. Must have blamed me for something else. I followed Mr. Santos to his office, preparing for another round of false accusations. But what came next surprised me completely. Mr. Santos sat behind his desk, looking uncomfortable. "Aaron, we've received some serious complaints about your performance. Richard has documented multiple instances of errors, missed deadlines, and unprofessional behavior." He slid a folder toward me. Inside were write-ups, all dated within the past month, all signed by Richard. Fabricated incidents I'd never been informed about. My hands trembled with anger, but I forced my voice to stay calm. "These are the first I'm hearing of any issues. Why wasn't I made aware of these concerns when they allegedly occurred?" Mr. Santos shifted uncomfortably. "Richard indicated he'd addressed them verbally with you." "He didn't. Not once." I pulled out my phone and opened my carefully organized folder of documentation. "But I do have records of my own. Would you like to review them?" For the next hour, I systematically dismantled every false claim. The missed deadline? I had email confirmation of on-time delivery. The unprofessional behavior? I had recordings of the actual conversation showing Richard had misrepresented what was said. The errors? I had the original files proving the errors were introduced after I'd submitted my work. Mr. Santos' face grew paler with each piece of evidence. "I need to escalate this to Mr. Thornton," he said finally. This is serious." "I agree," I said quietly. "It is serious." The next day, both Richard and I were summoned to a formal disciplinary review with Mr. Thornton and the HR director. The conference room felt like a courtroom. Mr. Thornton sat at the head of the table, the HR director beside him. Richard entered looking smug, clearly believing this meeting would result in my termination. I entered carrying a 3-inch binder. "Let's address these performance complaints," Mr. Thornton began. "Richard, you've documented serious concerns about Ms. Cole's work. Ms. Cole, you've contested these claims. Let's review them one by one." Richard went first, describing my supposed failures with practiced confidence. Each story was detailed, convincing, designed to paint me as incompetent and unstable. Then it was my turn. I opened my binder calmly. "Mr. Thornton, I'd like to present evidence that tells a different story." For 45 minutes, I walked them through documentation. Emails showing Richard had stolen my ideas and presented them as his own, not once, but 17 times over 3 years. Messages from clients praising work Richard had taken credit for. The Brennan Logistics folder showing he'd overcharged clients and blamed me for his failures. The track changes document shows his attempt to sabotage my recent project. The expense reports revealed thousands in fraudulent charges. The old HR complaints Mr. Walters had given me, showing this was a pattern spanning years. Richard's face went from smug to pale to bright red. He tried to interrupt several times, but Mr. Thornton silenced him with a raised hand. When I finished, the room was silent except for the sound of papers being reviewed. Finally, Mr. Thornton spoke. "Leave the room, both of you. We'll be in touch." Days passed. The office filled with whispers and speculation. Some people avoided me, clearly worried about being associated with someone who'd challenged a partner. Others quietly expressed support, sharing their own stories of Richard's behavior. Andre stopped by my desk. "Whatever happens, you did the right thing. Everyone knows it." "Thanks," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed him. Doing the right thing didn't always lead to the right outcome. I prepared for the possibility of being fired. Updated my resume, reached out to contacts at other firms, mentally prepared myself to start over. But I also kept working. Finished projects, responded to clients, maintained my professional standards. If I was going down, I'd go down doing excellent work. A week after the disciplinary review, Mr. Thornton's assistant called. "The CEO would like to see you." Immediately. I walked to his office with my heart pounding, unsure whether I was about to be fired or vindicated. His expression was unreadable as I sat down. Then he did something I didn't expect. He smiled slightly. "Ms. Cole, I owe you an apology. And an opportunity." 17. Mr. Thornton leaned forward, his expression serious. The audit revealed extensive misconduct by Richard Hale. Credit theft, expense fraud, client overcharging, falsified reports, and systematic harassment of junior staff. It's indefensible. I exhaled slowly, feeling vindication and exhaustion in equal measure. Richard has been placed on immediate suspension pending final review, he continued. But we have a problem. The Morrison account, our largest client, is threatening to leave. They've lost confidence in our leadership after learning about the irregularities. He paused, studying me. You built the strategy that won Morrison originally. You understand their needs. I'm asking you to temporarily oversee their account and rebuild their trust. It wasn't the outcome I'd expected. Not punishment for Richard, not an apology. But a test. This is a critical moment for the firm, Mr. Thornton said quietly. If Morrison leaves, others will follow. I need someone I can trust to fix this. Someone with integrity. I understood what he was really asking. Prove you're not just good at exposing problems, prove you can solve them. I met his gaze steadily. Give me 3 weeks. I'll rebuild that relationship. He nodded. 3 weeks. Starting now. I left his office and went straight to work. No celebration, no relief. Just focus. The Morrison account was a disaster. Their VP of Operations, Ms. Reynolds, was furious about the overcharging and broken promises Richard had made. She wouldn't even take my first 3 calls. Finally, I sent a detailed email. Ms. Reynolds, I understand you have no reason to trust Hale and Burrow right now. I'm not asking for trust, I'm asking for 1 hour to present a plan that addresses every failure in writing, with accountability measures and 0 additional cost to you. She agreed to meet. I spent 72 hours preparing. Not a sales pitch, but a genuine operational audit of everything that had gone wrong, with specific solutions for each issue. I brought receipts showing the overcharges and a credit plan. I brought timeline projections with penalty clauses if we missed deadlines. The meeting was tense. Ms. Reynolds' team was hostile, skeptical. But I didn't make excuses or blame Richard. I took ownership. Your trust was broken. Here's how we'll earn it back. Not with promises, with measurable results and full transparency. We worked through every concern. I answered every hard question. By the end, Ms. Reynolds looked slightly less angry. 3 weeks, she said. Show me results, not words. For 3 weeks, I worked like I'd never worked before. 18-hour days, direct client contact, solving problems before they escalated. And slowly, Morrison's confidence returned. By the end of week 3, Morrison's operations were running smoother than they had in 6 months. Problems that had festered under Richard's neglect were solved. Communication that had been fractured was restored. Ms. Reynolds called me into a meeting. I prepared myself for criticism, for more demands, for the possibility that 3 weeks wasn't enough. Instead, she smiled. Aaron, this is the level of service we expected from the beginning. You've exceeded it. Morrison Industries is not only staying with Hale and Burrow, we're expanding our contract. On one condition, you remain our primary contact. Relief and pride washed over me. I'd be honored. That afternoon, Ms. Reynolds sent a formal thank you letter to Mr. Thornton, praising my work and specifically requesting that I lead all future Morrison projects. When I returned to the office, people looked at me differently. Not with pity or wariness, but with respect. Andre hugged me. You did it. You actually did it. But the victory felt incomplete. Because Richard was still suspended, not terminated. Still able to return, still able to continue his pattern of destruction. That changed 3 days later when Richard made his biggest mistake yet. Richard returned from his suspension looking thinner, angrier. The audit had been damaging but not conclusive enough to terminate him immediately. His family's influence still protected him to some degree. He avoided me for the first few days, working from his office with the door closed. But I could feel his rage simmering. Then Morrison's expanded contract was announced company-wide, with my name prominently featured as lead consultant. That's when Richard snapped. He stormed into my office late one afternoon, his face red with fury. You think you've won? You think destroying my reputation makes you better? I stood up calmly. I didn't destroy your reputation, Richard. Your own actions did that. You manipulative little, he unleashed a string of insults, his voice rising. Other employees stopped working, watching through the glass walls. I stayed calm, hands at my sides, voice even. You need to leave my office. You're nothing, he shouted. You stole my client, turned this company against me, ruined everything I built. You're a vindictive, scheming. Richard. Mr. Thornton's voice cut through the tirade like a blade. He stood in the doorway, his expression thunderous. My office. Now. Richard left, still muttering angrily. I sat down, hands shaking from adrenaline. What Richard didn't know, a junior analyst had recorded the entire meltdown on her phone. By the end of the day, the video had spread to every employee in the company. Every insult. Every abusive word. Laid bare for everyone to see. The video spread through Hale and Burrow like wildfire. Employees who'd quietly suffered under Richard for years finally had undeniable proof of his true character. The polite, charming facade he showed to executives was stripped away, revealing the bully underneath. By noon, HR had received formal complaints from 11 different employees, all referencing the video and adding their own experiences with Richard's behavior. Mr. Thornton called an emergency executive meeting. Senior partners who'd protected Richard because of his family name could no longer ignore the evidence. The video had made his behavior impossible to defend. That evening, a company-wide email went out. After careful review, Richard Hale's employment with Hale and Burrow has been terminated, effective immediately. We are committed to fostering a workplace culture of respect and integrity. I read the email twice, sitting at my desk in the empty office. It was over. Really, finally over. Andre appeared in my doorway. Drinks? This deserves celebrating. I smiled. Maybe tomorrow. Tonight I just want to go home. But as I packed up my things, Mr. Thornton's assistant appeared. Ms. Cole? The CEO would like to see you before you leave. My stomach tightened. What now? Mr. Thornton's office was dimly lit, the sun setting outside his windows. He gestured for me to sit, his expression thoughtful. Aaron, I need to be honest with you. Richard's termination wasn't just about his behavior toward you. The audit uncovered systematic problems. Patterns of favoritism, buried complaints, a culture that protected legacy employees at the expense of talented people like you. He paused, choosing his words carefully. This firm has been coasting on reputation while losing touch with what made us successful: merit, innovation, integrity. We need to change. And I'd like your help doing that. I wasn't sure where this was going. What kind of help? I'm creating a new division focused on operational excellence and client relationship rebuilding. I want someone to lead it who understands both the strategic work and the importance of culture. He met my gaze. I want you to run it, Aaron. As a junior partner. The room seemed to tilt. A junior partner. At 28. Running my own division. This isn't charity or apology, Mr. Thornton continued. It's recognition of your capabilities. You proved you can lead, rebuild trust, and deliver results under pressure. That's exactly what this firm needs. I tried to process what he was offering. Everything I'd worked for, everything Richard had tried to deny me, handed to me not as a favor, but as earned recognition. There's one condition, I said carefully. Mr. Thornton raised an eyebrow. Name it. If I'm going to lead a division, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart, I need the authority to change how we operate. No more burying HR complaints. No more protecting people because of their family name. Transparent reporting, mentorship programs for junior staff, and clear processes for addressing misconduct. Mr. Thornton smiled slightly. You don't just want the job, you want to change the system. The system failed me and a lot of other people. If I'm in a position to fix it, I will. He extended his hand. Deal. You'll have full autonomy and budget for your division. Build something we can be proud of. I shook his hand, feeling the weight of the responsibility and the thrill of the opportunity. When do I start? Monday. Officially. But take the weekend, you've earned it. I left his office and walked through the quiet hallways, past Richard's empty office with its packed boxes, past the conference room where I'd been humiliated months ago, past the cubicle where I'd sat as an underestimated junior consultant. Everything had changed. Not because I'd destroyed Richard, though his own actions had led to his downfall, but because I'd built something better. Proven my worth through results, documentation, and unshakable integrity. On Monday morning, I arrived early. A nameplate had been placed on my new office door, Aaron Cole, Junior Partner, Excellence Division. And on my desk, a final envelope. Inside were Richard's official exit papers, stamped and filed. I filed them away without a second thought. He was already irrelevant to my future. Over the next 6 months, I built the Excellence Division from the ground up. I hired carefully, prioritizing competence and character over pedigree. I created transparent reporting systems where credit went to whoever actually did the work. I implemented mentorship programs pairing junior staff with senior partners who actually wanted to teach. The changes were met with resistance from some legacy employees who preferred the old system. But Mr. Thornton backed me completely, and results spoke louder than tradition. Client satisfaction increased. Employee retention improved dramatically. The company's reputation, damaged by Richard's misconduct, slowly rebuilt itself around values of integrity and merit. I promoted 2 junior analysts who'd been overlooked for years. One of them, a woman named Keisha, thanked me with tears in her eyes. I was about to quit. You gave me a reason to stay. That meant more than any title or salary ever could. Andre joined my division as a senior consultant. You're building something special here, he said. Something that actually values people. I still worked long hours. Still faced challenges and setbacks. But I worked for a vision I believed in, surrounded by people I respected. And I never once regretted speaking up against Richard, even when it felt dangerous. Because silence protects abusers, and documentation protects the truth. One afternoon, my assistant handed me a package. This came for you. Inside was a framed copy of Morrison Industries' thank you letter, professionally mounted. A note was attached. Leadership isn't about power, it's about integrity. Thank you for showing us the difference. Ms. Reynolds. I hung it on my wall, right across from my degrees. 2 years after that humiliating boardroom presentation, I walked through the Hale and Burrow building holding a plaque with my name etched in gold, Partner, Excellence Division. I passed the mailroom, where new hires were sorting correspondence. One of them, a young man who reminded me of my earlier self, looked up nervously as I approached. Ms. Cole? I wanted to say, your mentorship program changed my life. I was going to drop out of consulting, but you helped me see I belonged here. I smiled. You earned your place. Keep doing good work. As I continued to my office, I thought about Richard's words from years ago. Start where you belong, maybe the mailroom needs organizing. He'd meant it as an insult, a way to belittle my ambitions. But standing here now, with my own division, my own team, my own vision for how this company should operate, I realized he'd been half right. I did belong here. Not in the mailroom. But in a place where I could deliver real results, where integrity mattered more than pedigree, where talented people were valued regardless of their last names or family connections. Richard had tried to bury me in obscurity. Instead, he'd forced me to become exactly what this company needed, someone who refused to be silenced, who documented the truth, who built something better. I passed his old office, now occupied by a brilliant young consultant I'd hired. No trace of him remained. In my office, I reviewed proposals from my team, innovative, thoughtful, excellent work. This was the legacy I was building, not revenge, not destruction, but a system where people like me could thrive without fighting predators every step of the way. My phone buzzed. A text from Mr. Thornton, board meeting next month. Proposing you for a senior partner. Thoughts? I smiled and typed back, let's discuss. Then I closed my laptop and looked out the window at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Richard was probably still trying to rebuild his reputation, still blaming everyone but himself for his downfall. I felt nothing about that. No satisfaction, no bitterness. Just a quiet gratitude that our paths would never cross again. Because I'd learned the most important lesson of my career, you don't win by dragging others down to your level. You win by building something so strong, so valuable, so undeniable that their opinion of you becomes irrelevant. Richard thought I belonged in the mailroom, sorting other people's important correspondence. He was wrong. I belonged here, delivering results that actually mattered, leading teams that actually thrived, building a company culture that actually valued people over politics. And that's exactly what I'd done. The office was quiet now, most people gone for the day. I gathered my things, turned off the lights, and headed toward the elevator. As I passed the boardroom where Richard had humiliated me 2 years ago, I paused. That room had once represented my biggest failure, my most painful moment. Now it was just another conference room where I'd given dozens of successful presentations, where my ideas were heard and respected, where my voice actually mattered. I didn't need to reclaim that space or rewrite that memory. I'd simply built something bigger that made it irrelevant. In the parking garage, I sat in my car for a moment before starting the engine. My phone showed messages from my team, questions about Monday's client meeting, ideas for new initiatives, gratitude for opportunities I'd created. This was a success. Not the dramatic vindication of watching an enemy fall, but the quiet fulfillment of building something meaningful from the ruins of what tried to break you. Richard had taught me what kind of leader I never wanted to be. Mr. Thornton had given me the chance to show what kind of leader I could be. And I'd proven, to myself most of all, that integrity and competence could win, even in systems designed to reward the opposite. I started my car and drove home through the Seattle evening, past the coffee shop where Ms. Brennan had first shown me Richard's fraud, past the restaurant where Mr. Walters had handed me the courage to fight back, past all the places that had been part of this journey. Tomorrow, I'll wake up and continue building the Excellence Division. I'd mentor another junior analyst who felt overlooked. I'd present another strategy that would actually help a client succeed. I'd make another decision that prioritized people over profit margins. And somewhere, in some diminished capacity, Richard would wake up and face the consequences of his own choices. Not because I'd destroyed him, but because he'd destroyed himself. I'd just refused to be destroyed alongside him. That was the real victory. Not his fall, my rise. Not his punishment, my peace. Not revenge, revolution. The kind of revolution that happens when one person decides that being underestimated is an opportunity, that documentation is power, that patience is strategic, and that the best response to being told you don't belong is building a place where you do. I pulled into my driveway and sat for a moment, watching the sun set over the city. 2 years ago, I'd been a junior consultant with big dreams and no power. Now I was a partner with my own division and the ability to change lives. Richard had wanted to keep me in the mailroom, sorting through other people's success stories. Instead, I'd written my own. And it was a story about something more important than revenge or vindication. It was about the quiet power of refusing to accept someone else's assessment of your worth. About building proof instead of demanding recognition. About staying calm when others tried to provoke you, staying honest when others lied about you, and staying focused on excellence when others tried to drag you into their dysfunction. I thought about all the people who'd reached out over the past 2 years, other junior consultants from different firms, asking advice on how to handle toxic bosses, how to document misconduct, how to fight back without destroying themselves in the process. I'd told them all the same thing: build your case carefully. Stay professional always. Let the truth speak for itself. And remember, you're not trying to destroy anyone. You're trying to protect yourself and create accountability. That was the legacy I wanted. Not as the person who destroyed Richard Hale, but as the person who showed that speaking up, standing up, and building up could coexist. That you could fight injustice without becoming unjust yourself. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from Keisha, the analyst I'd promoted, just closed the Henderson account. They specifically asked for our team because of our reputation for integrity. Thank you for building something worth being part of. I smiled and typed back, you closed it. I just created the space for you to shine. That was the difference between me and Richard. He'd needed to take credit to feel valuable. I felt valuable by helping others succeed. I walked into my house, kicked off my heels, and looked at the framed photo on my entry table, me shaking hands with Mr. Thornton on the day I made partner, surrounded by my team, all of us smiling genuinely. That photo represented everything Richard had tried to deny me: recognition, respect, belonging, success on my own terms. He'd said I should aim lower, start in the mailroom, and know my place. Instead, I'd aimed higher, started my own division, and created my own place. A place where competence mattered more than connections. Where integrity was valued over politics. Where people could thrive without sacrificing their dignity. That was the mailroom moment Richard never understood. I did deliver. Just not on his terms. I delivered results that lasted. Relationships that mattered. Leadership that empowered rather than diminished. And somewhere in the wreckage of his own making, Richard was learning what I'd always known, that the people you underestimate are often the ones who rise highest. Not because they destroyed you, but because they built something you never could. Something real. Something earned. Something true. And that, more than any revenge, more than any vindication, was the sweetest victory of all.